Hey, yo, salute to the people. It's the social forecast. Today is Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. It's about 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as you all are waking up, as you all are seeing this, I hope you all do and did something today to further your goals and to help you realize your dreams. All right, let's get into it. So I came across this article a little earlier, well, yesterday at this point, and I thought it was very interesting. It didn't catch me by surprise, but it did, to see the extent of how um, bad things have gotten over time and how much worse they can get if, people don't read articles like these and if people don't pay attention to articles like these and try to actively do something to change what has been happening and what can potentially continue to happen. So the title of this article, which was published on November 5th, yesterday, um, Millennials earn 20% less than baby boomers did, which is the first kind of like, how is that? You think 30, 40, 50 years ago, you would naturally think with wages being way lower back then, with um, the furtherance of education, now, which the article harps on. Um, and also with the um, expanse of technologies and different fields that people are able to get into now with all the different mediums, you think, how the hell could that possibly be? But we're going to get into it. So, millennials earn 20% less than baby boomers did, despite being better educated. And this is the really, I think, the heart of the article, the education aspect. I have this conversation with people often, and I believe in the beginning, years ago, in the beginning of me starting this platform, I did a vlog comparing traditional education to life experience. And I think one of the biggest things that hurt this country that we got away from was favoring life experience over um, traditional education or higher education, a college degree. There used to be a time in this country when you could leave high school, get a job, and be able to start a family, purchase a home, purchase a car, sustain that family, provide stability for that family, financially speaking, with little more than a high school education. And then whatever you did to further your education and acquire more knowledge on your own is what you chose to do, which is always advisable. But it seems like we've taken a switch, and the vast majority of companies now favor having that piece of paper, even if you don't have the experience, because they figure they can teach you the experience if you have the education. But, and I've had this conversation often, real world experience trumps classroom education 7 days a week, 365 days a year, period. It always will. I don't, not by any means am I saying that people shouldn't go to college, that you shouldn't further your education in a traditional aspect. But what I'm saying is, if it's going to be geared more towards having a piece of paper, to determine what your income potential will be in the workforce, clearly, if we look back the past 30 to 50 years, it hasn't materialized the way that these companies or the way that society now thinks it should or it would have. And the biggest reason for that is because we're no longer in exports. Nothing is made at home anymore. During the Industrial Revolution, the time period which created the middle class in this country, where you had your coal mines, you had your factories and plants, things were made here, made, bought, sold, and then exported to other countries. Um, that created the middle class. That was the reason why there were so many jobs available. Um, and then you add on to that the trades, and then you fast forward the past 2 to 3 decades. No one's getting into trades now. The trade industry, whether it be plumbing, whether it be carpentry, even HVAC, a lot of the trade industries are hemorrhaging for people because the last um, and best of these trades are getting older. the baby boomers, they're aging out, they're retiring, and not enough new young people are getting into those trades to keep those industries sustainable. What you're going to see happening is, just to kind of divert a little bit from this article, because of that, you're going to start to see those services become a lot more expensive because there's not going to be enough supply for the demand. And there is money in those industries, and there's a lot of it potentially if you get to a certain point. And every time I meet a contractor, a carpenter, an HVAC technician, every time I come across these people and they talk about, them making 27 to 30 plus an hour, and because these companies just can't hire enough people because not enough people are getting into these trades, and you think, what's the reason? Is it that hard to get into these trades? And no, it's not. I mean, yeah, you have to know people to a certain extent, and of course there's work involved, but it seems like the younger generation, either they don't want to do that hands-on work or be what's considered a blue collar worker, so they're going to college to major in these things, thinking that it's going to yield them a certain financial return that it's either not yielding them because they come out of school 4, 6, 8 years later and they're still having a hard time finding a job, even with their college degree. Um, and they're in so much debt that a lot of these college students now coming out of college have what equates to be a mortgage and student loan payments before they even have a mortgage. And then they're kind of playing from behind, and then they've wasted all those years to get that life experience. Um, but that's me off on a tangent. To get back to this article, millennials earn 20% less than baby boomers did, despite being better educated. So let me see here. And this article was published by a Megan Leonhardt. So it starts here. Millennials are facing a shortfall compared to other generations when it comes to their paychecks. Overall, millennials earn 20% less than baby boomers did at the same stage of life, according to the emerging millennial wealth gap. A recent report from the nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank New America, specifically, median earnings for those 18 to 34 are lower than they were in the 1980s. So I'm glad this article pointed out 18 to 34 um, as the age group. So the first thing, right? There's taglines. We often refer to, and my generation's guilty of it too. We refer to the 18, 19, 20 year olds now as millennials. They're not millennials. The people who are in my age group, I'm 36. The people in my age group, the plus or minus 5, 6, 7 years, that's the millennials. If I'm not mistaken, and I feel like it changes, or people kind of change the years as time goes on. But if you were born from 1979 to, I think, about 1986, 87, 88, 89, somewhere, I don't know where it ends, that 3 year period, but I'm pretty sure if you were born from 1979 till the late 80s, you are the millennial generation. Not the younger kids now that everyone seems to refer to as millennials, but it's mostly the baby boomers who refer to that generation as the millennials. The baby boomers and then Generation X like to refer to the younger generation behind mine as millennials. My generation is the millennial generation. Before my generation is X, and then before that is the baby boomers. I don't know what they call these new motherfuckers. They're a whole new breed, and I don't know what they're called. Um, so yeah, ages 18 to 34 are lower than they were in the 1980s, a disparity that was first noted in a 2017 report from the nonprofit Young Invincibles. And the flow of today's paychecks is less predictable due to, in part, the effect of the Great Recession and a rise in contract and freelance positions that may be less consistent in hours and pay. Um, Article goes on to say that's in spite of overall higher education levels. Nearly 10%, 40% of millennials 25 to 37, um, and the article points it out, age group 25 to 37, that is the millennial generation. The, my generation, who people who are that age right now. Um, X when they were the same age. And this is per studies and research done by
research, Pew Research Center. So essentially, to this point, what this article is saying is, despite being better educated, despite having more access to further education, my generation is earning less than our grandparents. Which, when you think about it, again, when you factor in the Industrial Revolution, when you factor in all of the plants and the factories closing and going overseas for cheaper labor, when you factor that in, it makes sense. But people forget that. And people look at it just as, how could it be possible that we're making less than what our grandparents made if the wages are higher now than they were back then? The wages may overall be higher, but we know, and well, anyone who pays attention to their paychecks and who pays even a little bit of attention to the economy, or even had a civics class back in high school or middle school, we know that minimum wage has not kept up with the rate of inflation. Minimum wage has gone up, I don't know, maybe 4 times in the past 30, 40 years, on average. And the rate of inflation goes up every single year. For most people, the amount of their rent goes up every 1 to 2 to 3 years. If you live in a market where there's no rent control, which not a lot of people have the privilege of having rent control. So when you factor in all those things, it makes sense. And this is really important to my generation, the millennials, because we have to figure out a way to kind of stifle these numbers, or else it's going to continue to get more and more out of control. Lower pay, slower long-term wealth. Lower income levels are already having a long-term impact on millennials' ability to accumulate wealth. This is 100% true. Either through savings or home equity, because a lot of us don't own homes at our age compared to our grandparents who mostly owned homes at the same ages that we are now, which is sad, but it's not the fault of that generation. It's the fault of a lot of things falling apart, in this country over the past 30, 40, 50 years. Millennials are going to be on a completely lower trajectory than previous generations, says Reed Kramer, director of the Millennials Initiative at New America. The generational wealth gap has reached historic proportions. Kramer says the average millennial's wealth in 2016, ages 23 to 38, was 41% less than those who were at a similar age in 1989. 1989, we're talking 30 years ago. 30 years ago, this article is saying that based on studies and research and all the numbers, that 30 years ago, 41% more of the baby boomers at that point, or the baby boomers at that point had 41% more net worth than my age group right now, alive and breathing today, currently have. And that's, of course, partly to do with, the price of everything going up. But even still, when you match what wages were then with rate of inflation then, but versus the fact that there were more jobs available at lower education levels, it makes sense. Says it's also true among young families. Households headed by someone under 35 in 2016 had an average net worth of $10,900, which is $8,000 less than it was in 1995. And that may seem like a small amount, but when you talk about net worth, you're talking after all the bills are paid. You're talking after all the debts are factored. That's what's left liquid. And that is a big difference, because I don't know too many people right now who have $8,000 sitting in their account that's not accounted for, that they don't owe any of that money to, whether it be the government or a bank for a loan or what have you. Not a lot of people have $8,000 in my age group sitting in an account that's not claimed. That's what they mean when they say net worth. Article goes on to say part of that can be attributed to the Great Recession, true, and its after effects. Those who entered the workforce following this recession had fewer job opportunities and lower wages, starting them off at a disadvantage. But at the same time, many faced higher college tuition costs, leading to higher student loans and personal debt rates, which is what I said. When you're coming out of college, now you have this education, you have this piece of paper, and you're ready to start your career and start your life. Now you're finally getting into the real workforce, into your job, your career, whatever that's going to be. And before you even have a home, before you can even get a mortgage, you have what equates to a mortgage and college debt that you now have to start paying off immediately. And most people are not able to find a job fresh out of college that would equate to what their education level now is, even though a lot of these companies require it, that's going to allow them to pay off their debt and get ahead by being able to get a home and getting a car. And now with the prices of these cars now, and with the fact that everyone seems to lean towards leasing and financing rather than buying used and not having car payments, people are paying $5, $6, $7, $800 a month in lease and finance payments before they even get to pay their insurance. So you have a lot of people right now paying between $7,000 and $1,000 a month when you factor in their car payment and their insurance. That's just for their car that they drive every day to and from work and to wherever else. Now throw in another, I don't know, what's the medium rent? Anywhere from $900, depending on if you're single by yourself or if you have a partner and kids, anywhere from $900 to $1,800 a month in living, just for the roof over your head, whether it be rent, whether it be a mortgage that a lot of us don't have. The majority of anyone's income is taken up just by what they pay for the transportation to and from work and their living quarters. So when you really put that down in front of you, it's no wonder that you can clearly see why we don't have that net worth. You can clearly see why we have less. And a lot of us are paying for things that we do not own. Personally, myself, I don't have a car payment. That's by choice because I know that I would rather have money to either put aside or to do other things with or to build on or to start a business or a side, hustle or whatever you want to call it, rather than give that money to a bank on a depreciating asset like a vehicle that after 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years, yeah, I may be able to turn that in for another vehicle, a newer vehicle, but now I'm starting all over again. All that money is being flushed down the drain. For most of us, at least anywhere from 5 to 20% to 21%, depending on what your credit is all interest. So you never see that back. That's gone. That's not even going toward the loan. But that's off on a tangent. But that's something that we have to get control of also. We were not taught financial literacy from our parents because they didn't know. It was new for them. It was new for their parents. Credit and the whole concept of it, and department store cards, and Macy, MasterCard, and Visa, and Discover, and all these different credit scenarios that we have more now than before, but they're not that old. They don't go back that far. So we are in a position now more so than our grandparents, and definitely more so than our parents, but definitely more so than our grandparents, to really learn about proper credit management, debt to income ratios, and what all these different things mean. It's a learning process every day, but it's something that we have to learn, or else we're never going to acquire anything closely resembling what middle class used to be. Article goes on to say the recovery was not experienced by everyone. Even as the economy steadily added back jobs, the protracted recovery was experienced unevenly, with well-off households doing better at the expense of others. In 2016, the top 10% of the country's highest income earnings received half of the total income generated in the United States. That's up dramatically from the same segment of households receiving just 38% of the country's total income in 1992. the 90s is kind of hard to judge because we know, well, anyone in my age group, looking back, we know that during the 90s, there was a crazy boom, not just in real estate, but also, the whole dot-com bubble. That mid to late 90s, it was a crazy boom. The economy was doing excellent because of all the internet really blowing up and becoming like a household tool. And all of these dot-com companies started sprouting up, and real estate bubble was created. So the 90s is it's one of the best decades in the past 40, 50 years because of that. But then we know what happened shortly after that. The bubble started to crash, started to burst, and then 9/11 happened, and then everything just went downhill. So when they compare it to the 90s, I kind of take it with a grain of salt because the 90s was a different time. Millennials held an average of $162,000 of assets compared to Generation X's average of $198,000 at the same age, according to the St. Louis Federal Reserve. Multi-generational fallout. These income and wealth challenges have transcended into other trends for millennials, specifically with fewer in this generation getting married. That's See, I don't know if the married part is as much financial or as much a contributor to what this article is talking about, or just the fact that the real millennials and people right before my generation, and even people in my generation, but on the lower end, you just can't trust people nowadays. So people are opting not to get married, and I don't blame it. I cannot fault those people. Because I've said this since the inception of my podcast, this YouTube channel, and even for the past 15 years in conversations that I have with different people and roundtables and whatever. I foresee that in the next 10, 20 years, we're already seeing it, and this article points it out. People are not going to be getting married. What is the point? But that's another vlog. So, yeah, fewer people getting married, fewer people buying homes, fewer people starting families. The starting family, well, of course, they're buying homes because who has the credit and the money to do so? And not a lot of people educate themselves on the various federal and even local programs out there for new first-time buyers. Every state that you live in, even in some of the counties you live in, you people have to start researching and looking into the programs that are available to you to get homes at lower down payments, lower interest rates. There are a lot of first-time buyer programs out there that I don't think, especially in the urban areas and people, minorities, there are a lot of programs out there. They're not publicized, they're not broadcasted, but if you do a little bit of research, do a little bit of digging, they're definitely out there for you. And a lot of people don't know about them and don't think that they can attain those things, but they're definitely out there. Just as a side note for anyone in that point right now where they want to get a home, these things are out there for you to make it easier. So the home part, the home buying part, I think that's of course partly attributed to this article, but I think also a lot of people just don't know what's available to them. But the marriage thing, I just think that it's a fading, long-standing fad, and I think this generation, mine, and definitely the one right behind mine, they're just not beat. They're just not beat to be dealing with a person that they don't know, can switch at any time, that can't really be trusted. I think it's just a generation of people just living their lives and dealing with who they deal with and vibing with who they vibe with at that time. But the whole marriage thing, it's not what it used to be. It's not romanticized anymore half as much as it used to be. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. So I'm gonna skip past that. Experiencing delays in life milestones. So, for example, marriage rates among millennials are estimated to drop by 70%, and a record number will remain unmarried by age 40, according to the Urban Institute. Yeah, And I think most of that is attributed again to people just aren't beat. And you figure you get married, what's the very next thing? You start a family. A lot of people now, and I'm seeing it in my age group increasingly, people want to finish school. They want to get into their career and they want to be established in their career before they even think about getting married and having kids, which is a way to do it. I mean, historically, like our great grandparents, great grandparents, and grandparents, and even our parents, they started young. Most of them got married in their late teens, had kids, did all that first, and then tried after the family came, after they created the family, tried to find a way to, you know, attain financial stability, which is, when you put it out like that, it does sound backwards. But that was the norm. That was always the norm. I think now people are waiting until they're older to have kids. With the advancements in the medical fields, it's a lot healthier now to wait a little longer to have kids. There's still dangers associated if you wait too long, but people are accepting that risk because they don't want to bring kids into the world, which I respect, and not be able to take care of them the way that they feel like they would want to. And I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. 40's late though. As a side note, but by the time my youngest, who's 8 now, is 18, I will only be 44. I could not imagine at 35, 36, 37, and above now having a child where my oldest is going to be 14, my one in the middle is 10, and then my youngest is 8. I could not imagine starting over now. So I couldn't subscribe to that shit, not at all. Income is stagnant relative to the past. It's been more volatile relative to the past. That combination leads people to have a lot less and be really suspect about making commitments to the future, which is sad. People are less likely to invest in themselves, try to start businesses, take on those risks because, again, income is just not there and the reserves are not there. So we're really trying to build generational wealth for the vast majority of us from us. We're not inheriting it as what would be ideal. We're not inheriting it as people were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And as certain parts of the population are fortunate enough to, and just have to worry about keeping it and passing that down. The vast majority of us millennials in this 27 to 35, 36, 37 age group, we have to build the empire, which is a lot harder, especially in today's economy and job market. Let's see. All right. So this may affect millennials' ability to retire comfortably and pass on wealth, since home ownership, in particular, is still one of the most secure ways to build wealth, and one of Americans' biggest chunks of equity is real estate. Owning your home, maybe owning multiple homes, that's where you're going to get a lot of your equity. A lot of your wealth will stem in some way, shape, or form from the property you own. Because unlike a vehicle, owning a home, owning some kind of real estate, will, in the long run, whatever you have to spend into it to maintain it, goes into the value and comes back to you at some point. And not enough of us are owning homes. Not enough of us. This has the potential fallout for not only for millennials, but also for future generations, says Liz Hipple, Senior Policy Advisor at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. And this is a direct quote. "It means there's less financial resources for investment in tomorrow's generation. People are afraid to or don't have the ability to invest in their future. Like I said, invest in themselves." She also says if millennial families have less money to spend on their children's health and education, then it may have negative implications for those children's earnings potential. And that's true as well. And we have seen that if we look back from our childhood, because our parents didn't have it and didn't know how to manage what they did have, we find ourselves in the same precarious situation. But we have the knowledge and we have the access and we have the platforms and the mediums now to change that. And there are a number of young people, people of all ages, creating situations for themselves through different platforms like YouTube and whatever other various social media sites. And the potential is there for a lot more people to do the same thing. It matters for our kids and their outcomes. And basically, if we're able to turn the kind of dismal financial crisis that is really taking hold, if we're able to get control of it now, we still have enough time. Even the people, the millennials at the higher end, like myself, I'm kind of in the middle. But for the higher end, even down to the lower end, we're still young enough. Even myself being 36, we're still young enough that we can figure out a way to turn the tide of what this article is pointing out. And if we can do that, we can hopefully end up better than where we started, because what will further exacerbate the problem, right, is that one thing the baby boomers have that we will probably not have is the Social Security. Where they're already collecting. Not only will the reserves of Social Security not be there at a certain point, but now they're to try and control the hemorrhaging of those reserves. They're pushing the date where you're even eligible to claim and collect Social Security farther and farther back. And if you factor in, especially for those people who look like me and come from the same places that I do, the minorities, think about what the life expectancy is of the average person, and think about how they're raising the age where you're eligible for Social Security. The vast majority of us, unfortunately, but it's realistic, will not live to see the age where we will be eligible to collect Social Security. And, conspiracy theorists would say that's part of the design. But regardless, we are responsible. The whole Social Security thing was created back in the late 30s or shortly after. I don't want to get the exact year, but shortly after the Great Depression, right? The stock market crash of the 30s, as a way to put a safety net in place, for the older generation, so that when they were done working, after they had gotten finished putting into the pot, there was something there to sustain them in their golden years. We don't have that anymore. And despite the fact that even if we did, and for our children who definitely won't have it, at the end of the day, we're responsible for our personal wealth. We're responsible for our families. We're responsible for creating a line and a financial lifeline to ourselves in times when we can't work due to sickness or what have you, or downturns in the economy that leads to layoffs. We are ultimately, the government is responsible. There's an article out there, several out there, that talk about national kind of income. There are countries out there that operate that way, where there's like a standard income that's given to every citizen. And there are articles out there talking about what it would look like if America had that. And that's fine. I'm sure it would be menial. But at the end of the day, unless the government is going to step in and say, as United States citizens and as taxpayers is being required to pay taxes, we're going to give everyone, every single citizen, a stipend. That may or may not happen ever. It's interesting to hear it being talked about. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my family, my financial position. You're responsible for your family, your financial position. And the research, the tools, the knowledge is out there for us to do anything that we can think of that will generate income for us. And the reason why I wanted to cover this article on this platform is because, for one, that's what this platform is designed to be about. It's not the ratchet stuff. It's not the entertainment stuff. That shit's all fun too. And that may be the shit that gets views, not content like this. But if only 2 people see this video, but take it seriously, do research, try to find ways to afford yourself the opportunity to look into some of these real estate or homeowner and first time buyer programs, or something that you may have always wanted to do, like start a YouTube channel or start a side business. Anything that you can do to generate income outside of your job, what you go to, the place you go to every day to make your paycheck, to pay your bills and satisfy your financial obligations. Those are That's not the money that's going to ever get you rich. That's not the money that's going to ever get you financial independence or financial freedom. It's not your 9 to 5. It's not your 9 to 5. It's not your 11 to 7. It's not your 7 to 3 or 3 to 11. It's whatever you find that you can do on top of that to generate extra income that you can use to invest back into yourself, or that you can put away for later, or that you can use to buy a home, maybe buy multiple homes, over time, what have you. Read the article. I will put the link in the description box for those of you who may want to check out the article. But when I open each video with each vlog with, I hope you all did something today to further your goals and help you realize your dreams. It's that shit. I mean that shit. That shit's important. It's the little steps that we can take every single day to get closer to that goal. May or may not ever reach it, but the possibility that you can by taking those small steps is exponentially greater than the non-existent chances of you ever reaching goals or dreams by not doing anything. So that's all I stopped through to say. I apologize if this vlog was super long, but it was necessary for an article like this. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know. It's a social forecast. See you on the next one. Peace and love.